to a Republican Political Action Conference. GOPAC has been meeting in Washington for the past 2 days, and members of the group have heard from Republican lawmakers and presidential contenders. Mr. Key's remarks last about 45 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? I hope you were all as stimulated by this morning as I was. This isn't just a social gathering, although I do consider you all my friends. This is a very hard-working, active group of Republicans who are committed to our children and grandchildren. Now, at lunch, we had a very interesting discussion at our table with Alan Keyes. Some of it may or may not come up in his talk to you today. But I said to him, I don't even want to go up and introduce you because I don't want to miss anything you're saying. I don't totally agree with everything, but I'm fascinated by everything. Alan Keyes has spent his life defying the expectations of those who underestimate him. At a young age, Alan Keyes was winning praise and awards for his ability as an orator. He is twice a Harvard graduate. He is also twice a Republican Senate candidate. Under Ronald Reagan, he served as Assistant Secretary of State, and more importantly, as ambassador to the United Nations as part of Jeane Kirkpatrick's team. It was here that he was best able to put his oratorical skills to use, facing down the lies and perversions of freedom put forward by the enemies of liberty. He has served as a university president and as president of Citizens Against Government Waste, where he founded Taxpayers Action Day and led the fight for smaller, more efficient government. He is now seeking the Republican nomination for president, and again, defying expectations. He is always insightful, always provocative, and always a stem winder. Please join me in giving a warm and generous welcome to Ambassador Alan Keyes.
Thank you very much. Now, how do you follow it up here when somebody says that you're always a stem winder? See, the only way I can make sure that that's true is by minding my watch before I put it down, because otherwise I wouldn't be sure of it at all. And I'm not sure so much today that stem winding is the order of the day. I want to take a few minutes to talk about the issues I believe are fundamental in the course of the next couple of years of the Republican Party's life. And then I want to open the floor to questions, because that's the part I enjoy the most, actually, since I already know what I'm going to say, whereas I never know what people are going to ask, so it's much more fun for me when the Q&A starts. But I do think it's important to take stock for a couple of minutes, as people always say, of where we have been and whither we are headed, and whether we don't have some fundamental choices to make in order to make sure that wherever it is we are going, it is the place we want to get to. Because you can't always be sure of that, can you? In the course of the last few months, obviously, we as Republicans and those of us who are associated with the conservative causes in this country have had great reason to be elated, since we accomplished in the course of the last election cycle in 1994 that remarkable feat of taking over the deliberative body of the U.S. government. And we have also, I think, accomplished the remarkable feat in the last several months of demonstrating that, contrary to what the Democrats seem to have proved over the 40 years prior to our takeover, it is in fact possible to use the institution of the Congress of the United States and produce some good results. And I think that that is something that the American people are certainly going to be prone to reward us for. But to tell you the truth, that's not really what elections turn on. Some people think it is, but it's not. People are not rewarding you for what you did yesterday, because they know good and well that what you did yesterday doesn't say anything about what you'll do tomorrow. More important than what you did yesterday is the vision you can present to folks of where we are headed now, what the future will hold under Republican leadership. What are the things that we consider important and fundamental to this country as it approaches the 21st century? And I just want to make one simple point in the next 6 or 7 minutes, which doesn't go into a lot of arcane issues and so forth and so on, but which I think is critical. It may be the essence of the challenge that faces us right now as we go into the future. We can try to make all kinds of points on a discrete set of issues that would be as long as your arm by the time we got through writing them out, and we might do pretty well or pretty badly, depending on how many we manage to achieve, but we would still miss the point. Because I don't think that's the great challenge the American people are worried about right now. And I've had that confirmed in the last several weeks because of the phenomenon I've been going through that it kind of put me in the improbable position of throwing my hat in the ring for the presidential nomination. And what finally convinced me to do it was that in response to some of the speeches that I was giving where I thought I was making a fairly simple common sense point, it turned out that I was in fact speaking to the heart and the grief and the anxiety of many millions of people around this country. And it is a heart and a grief and an anxiety that doesn't have to do with the rate of inflation. And it doesn't have to do with the rate of unemployment. And it doesn't have to do with the size of the deficit this year. And it doesn't have a lot to do, in fact, with whether or not we are going to cut taxes today or tomorrow. All those things eventually will be affected by it, but they are not the issue. Americans have finally, I think, after many years of wandering in a relative liberal wilderness, begun to question whether or not the common sense they had surrendered to the social science experts and the liberal ideologues wasn't right after all. They have begun to wonder whether their sense, which they see confirmed all the time in their daily lives, isn't actually true also of the society and of the country at large. Their sense that it is not what you have, but what you are. Their sense that this country's foundation is not our material prosperity, our dollars, our huge corporations, but in fact the heart, the soul, the moral being of its people. And that if we allowed that character to be finally destroyed, then nothing will save this republic or this people from self-destruction. We may not understand that. But I believe a lot of people in this country do understand it. And I got letters from thousands of them. And they moved me deeply because I got the sense that I was reading things from people who were kind of waiting out the death of a dear friend or relative, who had kind of gotten really ill with a terminal illness they didn't quite understand, and which had come to them as a sudden shock, which I think it did. Because a lot of folks in this country had been going about their business, doing the things that people do. You know, having families, raising kids, you know, doing their work, taking care of their farm, doing their chores, whatever they might be. Going to church on Sunday, a lot of them, and even when they didn't, believing in God and expecting that at some point or another he was going to have his say, and they'd better be mindful of that from time to time. So not perfect people, but people who never lost the sense that at the end of the day you did have to try to do the right thing. By your wife, by your children, by your family, by your community. And they just went along that way every day, the way Americans have through the decades and centuries of this country's existence. And then something woke them up and they started to look around. Now, you and I would have to say, I certainly say that it was a long time coming, but that we can really, I think, be mindful of God's providence in one thing. And I know it came as a blow to us in 1992 when it happened. But you know, one of the best things that may have happened in the history of this republic was the election of William Jefferson Clinton. Because when people looked up one day and they saw somebody like Joycelyn Elders as Surgeon General of the United States, they realized that the America they carry in their heart may not be America anymore, and they woke up. And they said that it was time we did something to put this country on the right track. And in 1994, they made a start. And I think